Welcome to the Forging Honor podcast. I'm Jonathan George.
And I'm Benjamin Jones. Here at Forging Honor, we explore what it means to live as Christian men. Along the way, we'll be doing challenges, building habits and character through action.
Jon McCallum is a full-time poet and graduate of New College Franklin. He joins us today to talk about smartphone addiction, his switch to a light phone, and life in a technologically saturated world. Welcome, Jon.
Thank you. Thank you guys for having me.
All right, we are excited to talk to you today, but before we jump into the main conversation, what we normally do here on Forging Honor is a challenge check-in, where Banjo and I talk about the current challenge and the current habit that we're trying to form. The current challenges last for 6 weeks, so that's 42 days. The current challenge is pretty simple. It's to turn your phone completely off for 1 hour every day. The goal of this is to help us put away our smartphones a little more and to be more focused in an increasingly distracted world. Banjo, how have you been doing?
6 out of 7. If we're counting full weeks, doing very well. This has been great. I know we came off of one that was a little maybe controversial, a little bit where we got into the
ritual.
weeds. But as we've been going through this one, this challenge, I've been like, this just seems like a no-brainer for me in terms of like all around wins. I've been changing my relationship with other devices as a result of this challenge, just because of how things are going, and I've appreciated dumbing down my phone as much as possible, trying to separate it from some of the other parts of my life. So yeah, this has been a lot of fun for me. It's been very helpful. The number of books I'm reading is gradually increasing as the challenge is progressing. So I'm counting that as a win. How is your side of things going?
It's going well. Also, 6 out of 7. Actually, it's a 5 out of 7 this week. I was thinking of last week. I will say that all 7 days I've had my phone away from myself for more than an hour. I just forget to hit the power off button sometimes. So I need to get better about that.
Yeah.
But to meet the technicality of the challenge. But in terms of the spirit of it, we're 7 on 7 as far as my phone is away. I'm not thinking about it. I went and visited my family recently, got to spend some time playing disc golf with my siblings, intentionally left my phone away, never pulled it out. It was just 2 hours undistracted time. It was great. Jon, have you done something similar to this? We'll jump into some questions now, but did you do something similar to this before jumping onto the light phone?
Yeah, I started intentionally leaving my phone at home when I went to school for a while, just so it wouldn't be distracting in class. And I often found myself in the hallways in between classes using it. So I started trying to do that. And in addition, that I found really helpful was grayscaling, just turning off the color, turning off the saturation. I did that for a while as well before I made my way to the light phone.
So you're on the light phone now. Can you tell us a little bit about the journey? More than just some of the things you've tried. Tell us some of the things you tried before you switched ultimately to the light phone. Then give us some of the reasons you found why the light phone to be superior to be a dumbed down or less distracted smartphone.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I've always had kind of a tumultuous relationship with technology. Just, coming from parents who weren't used to it, weren't educated about it. I spent most of my time in high school just playing video games and wasting my time on YouTube. And then when I got to college, I found myself doing the same thing, spending a lot of time with distractions, also finding it a place for just complete indulgence in whatever appetite I had at the time. So, I mean, as most men struggle, I struggled with porn. I struggled with overconsumption of things that weren't helpful. But really, the big kicker for me in college was YouTube. I just loved to watch hours and hours of things that didn't matter and I didn't care about. So before I jumped to the light phone, I started trying to limit my computer, just limiting time that I spent on there, time that I spent doing things that didn't matter. And I never even really thought of the light phone as a possibility at that point. I was working as a SEO analyst, doing web research and writing articles. And so I was just really involved in technology. And then when that kind of wrapped up and I graduated and got married, I became a teacher. And at that point, I didn't need the smartphone anymore. And so I cut it out after doing, like we talked about, the grayscaling and spending time away from it.
So you identified a problem, which, as you've mentioned, most young men are feeding various appetites, whether it's lust or simply a desire for distraction, desire to escape into something like YouTube. You identified that problem and you started with some of the things that we're talking about, as far as turning off the phone for an hour, leaving your phone at home. But was it simply, were those things simply not enough, or was it that you simply found the light phone to be a better option?
Yeah, I mean, there's a very real sense in which the light phone is far worse. It can't hold a charge very well, super hard to text on with the e-ink screen. It doesn't update often. The maps are horrible. I thought I was going to get lost coming out here to do this. But ultimately, it was just through a lot of conversations surrounding technology that I decided to jump to the light phone. Outside of just, I mean, I believe that if you put in the effort and are conscious, you can eliminate those things from a smartphone. But it was more so like the life that I wanted to live was one in which I didn't have distractions on me all the time. So that's what ultimately brought me to the light phone.
Sure. Do you miss the smartphone?
You know, so I just recently started using a laptop again. And I hadn't missed anything up until I did that. And now I really miss chess.com. Yeah. I love playing chess and I miss being able to stream music. Those two things I would love for those to be an option. But
so what other tools have you had to use? Because we talked about the end of a previous episode, some of the tools that are on a smartphone.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned music, maps. Those are very useful things to have. What other tools have you had to physically replace in your life?
Honestly, I haven't. I've started buying some CDs and listening to more radio in the car. But the light phone has a maps application. It's pretty bad, but it has one. And most of the other things, I'm just kind of, I've lived life without them long enough that I don't really miss them. You know, I don't have a camera. I can't take pictures, which sometimes is unfortunate, but also sometimes it's great, you know?
For sure. Banjo, you have any questions? Jump in here.
Well, I've got so many, actually. It's going to be actually very difficult for me to not ask Jon just a ream full of questions about his life as a full-time poet. He was talking before we started recording about how he writes his poems on a typewriter, which actually one of the things that this challenge has pushed me to do is I have a typewriter and I've spent more time writing on it this week. And I found it super helpful just as a way of segregating my writing tasks, because like the computer I'm like you, Jon. I spend way too much time on YouTube, and the biggest problem is when I'm on a writing project, I think, oh, I can find a great idea for this on YouTube, so I go over there, and within 5 minutes, I'm watching baseball highlights. So that's a total waste of time. But I can't do that on the typewriter, and that's been a huge benefit, and I feel my productivity has improved as a result. But I'm going to try and stay away from writing related questions in general.
You can ask them.
Except maybe this one. I am a large comic book nerd, decent comic book nerd. And one of my favorites is Daredevil. And of course, Daredevil, as a result of his tragic accident with radioactive fluid, loses his sight, but everything else gets heightened. And in my imagination, the light phone experience feels like becoming Daredevil in the modern world. You're eliminating this one kind of digital sense. And my hope is, or my thought is, my imagination is that the rest of the world kind of opens up to you, that you become this sort of like superhuman, next level person without the phone. Is that really the case, or is it really? Are there things that you've noticed that your senses have become heightened to? Maybe to be metaphorical and poetic, or just nerdy, or has it been maybe more of a gradual transition than we would think?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, the benefits of moving away from the the smartphone, I could just talk about for hours. So if I derail, just stop me. Um,
No, that's good.
but yeah, I mean, for one, the amount of time I have in my day is just astounding. And like this started when I was working as first year high school English teacher, right? So I was working 60, 65 hours a week doing that. And I had so much more time than I expected. I mean, I was tearing through books faster than I ever had in my life, just reading so much. I picked up the violin, started going on walks, started doing all this stuff, and it just felt like my days had doubled in size. And then on top of
And
that,
this is just because distractions eliminated.
yeah, yeah. I mean, there was nothing.
Okay, wow.
I had a laptop for work that I kept at the school, and so when I was there, I did my work on it, and when I left, I just had so much time. Um,
Even though you said you were working 60-hour weeks.
yeah, yeah, it was wild. I mean, I did not think it was possible.
Wow. That makes me want to ditch all my technology.
Yeah, I mean, how do you ignore that voice in your head? I mean, maybe you don't have this voice. In the back of my head, there is the technology in the other room going, if you use this, you can get so much more done. That's the great selling point of these things. Look at how much more you can get done with AI or with Google, whatever it is. Your reality has been totally different. What do you do instead? Is just the old way the better way?
Yeah, I mean, I spend a lot of time, especially when I'm out in public, just sitting and thinking. I mean, there's so many areas now where the social norm is to just be on your phone while you wait for something, and also in terms of the distractions of technology, that was a really hard fought battle for me. Even after like switching to the light phone and tearing away from some of these things, I would still find myself, getting done with a day of work and just wanting to kick back and watch something on Netflix or something like that. So I really locked down everything just completely for a while. And it was at first really hard and awful and not fun at all. But ultimately, it was just so rewarding to have all that time.
So you did a full, I guess folks call it a digital detox, even a dopamine detox. So not even a TV in your house.
No TV. I spent 1 year with the only time I really had any access to technology is when me and my wife would watch a movie together.
I see. You did a full on, no tech, full detox. That's incredible. I don't think I've ever met anyone else that has done that. You said a full year? That's actually, there's a stretch there to this challenge. Man, we could totally take this and run with it.
I mean, that's the marathon. We're running 5Ks over here. That's the marathon event. I'm curious, was there a break point for you where with the technology, you're saying it was horrible at first. Was there a point that you had where a eureka moment where you were like, oh my gosh, this is a great decision? Or did it just was it more gradual than that?
Yeah, it definitely worked itself out gradually, but I remember one day very clearly where I got home from work and I went on a walk at the park and I was just taken by just how vivid the colors and the sounds were, just in a way that I felt like I hadn't noticed in a long time. And then I got home, practiced the violin, worked on a personal writing project, read, and by the time I got to bed, I just felt like I had lived so much life and seen so much in one day. And I was all of a sudden, all the hardship of being completely removed from such an important aspect of society just clicked. And it was totally worth it at that point.
Yeah. Is there a sense of loneliness in that? Like, obviously it's a much richer and full, like you get to see all of the colors. That's awesome. But I imagine like one of the things that keeps a lot of people from making that jump, I think, is that it seems like a lonely world out there, separated from the cord. But you did it. You escaped from the matrix. Was that hard in terms of that relational aspect, or has that been more freeing?
It has primarily just been freeing. There are some things that I miss out on a lot. I mentioned earlier, the light phone can be tricky. It crashes, doesn't always text very well. And so I've just wound up half the time I don't even have my phone on me anymore. And so I am really hard to get in touch with. but I found that I don't miss that because I think online relationships are such a poor imitation of the real thing that ultimately for me, it just not having that there made the real thing richer.
So this having Banjo call into our session, it's like this shocking alien coming at you.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Totally different thing.
That's yeah, that's interesting.
A lot to chew on there.
JJ, I've hogged the mic. You guys still some questions here?
No, I'm just chewing on it. And I think for me, the crazy part is I did not know until we sat down and we're recording that you went a full year. That is truly incredible. And I don't know how to,
I don't know how to process it.
I think the longest I've ever gone like completely without tech is like maybe 3 days on a camping trip.
Mm-hmm.
And you're camping, like it's something you're so wrapped up in doing. It's not just regular life, and going even 3 days of regular life without tech for me would, my work is in software, so it would be impossible as far as the work machine. I guess I could ditch the personal stuff, but that's really incredible. I just want to say that's an incredible thing. And I look up to you in this.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's inspiring. Jon,
is there, so on the tech side, sorry, Banjo, on the tech side, is there a reason you went with the light phone over a regular dumb phone or a flip phone or something? Just on a purely practical note.
Mm-hmm. I really love the size of the light phone. It's tiny. I have really fat thumbs, and those little keyboards, fat thumbs, not a good mix. Also, I found it really challenging to find a flip phone with current support. But the light phone, has a whole team around it, and it's very intentionally designed around the idea of, digital minimalism. So instead of being outdated, it tries to stay up to date in the ways that you need it to. Also, it has a really customizable toolbox. So it has a music app. It can hold a gigabyte of music. It has maps. It has a notes app, a calendar app. But all of those things are up to you. You can put them on there from a computer browser, or you can just leave them off. And I really like that custom. Yeah.
Okay. That answers my question. Banjo?
Well, normally I save this question for the end, but I'm so fascinated that I have to jump the gun. You're a poet, so the poet's job is to notice and to be kind of the great observer.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite questions to ask people is, what is the question we're not asking? What's the thing that we're not noticing? When it comes, we have these wide ranging conversations on Twitter, on Facebook, and all these things online about what we think the tech problem is, hypocritically still using the technology. You're outside the bubble. What really is the thing that we should be talking about? What have you maybe noticed or learned about either yourself or technology in general, or maybe just the situation that we find ourselves in? What questions should we be asking about this whole situation that we're leaving out?
I think if there was one thing that I could put into the conversation and just have in the back of people's heads, it would be for everyone to be asking every time they open a website, what is the purpose of this website? What is the functionality of what I'm doing right now? Because I spent a lot of time working as an SEO copywriter, and I was writing blog articles for people, various clients in various fields that I didn't know a lot about. And those blog articles were informative, but the point of them, right, is to get people to read that and go, oh, I trust this, whatever, insert company here. I'm going to use their service. And I think a lot of people don't realize that if something is successful on the internet, it is an advertisement primarily. And because we don't realize that, I think a lot of people assume there's a lot of information they're getting that is valid, that very well may be valid. But the primary goal, the reason it's in front of you, is because someone along the line said, we need to keep this person on this site for this amount of time to make this amount of money.
That's a good question to ask.
The whole place is an attention trap, and whatever rises to the top, it's rising there because somebody's money is underneath it, pushing it there.
Are you familiar with Cal Newport?
heard the name, but no.
He writes on tech and on the digital problems that are like these. He's a computer scientist. And his thing he talks about, he's excited to see how things like podcasts, individual newsletters, those kinds of things are growing because people intentionally put themselves, they usually find out, they put themselves in the way of hearing about that, and they find out about it usually through word of mouth rather than through advertisers. That does occasionally happen. And you do have big companies pushing out their latest podcasts or whatever. But, platforms like this where discussions are able to be had and then someone gets to listen to this conversation and they get to intentionally decide that, right? They're not being asked to sit and have their ears on for the whole podcast so that we make money or something.
Yeah.
So anyway, that just made me think, I think what you're saying, it totally rings true because there's a whole world exactly like what you're saying where your eyeballs are the product.
Mm-hmm.
And, YouTube is that way, Facebook, Twitter, etc. They're all that way. And kind of there's this section of the internet that's a little more direct to consumer, as it were. Like, let's blast out this series of ads and more about, we're going to create this particular piece of content. And I do think there are YouTube channels like this. There are accounts on Twitter like this, but they're going to put out this particular piece of content for this particular user. And there are certain mediums that are better at that. I think podcasting is one of those. I think newsletters are on that, or they're in that scope. I don't know. Are those kinds of content or that kind of medium, are those things that you have found to be a quality to put back into your life, or have you stayed away from pretty much all tech?
Yeah, I have started to slowly reincorporate some of those things. Like you were saying, there is a small, vibrant side of the internet that is full of actual conversations and life and art and beautiful things that are really indispensable to the people that use them, right? I mean, I don't think that the entirety of tech as it is today is bad, but I think what's been really cool about my journey is now I have the opportunity to pick and choose what to place into my life. Like I can decide the voices that I want to hear and how often I want to hear them, instead of there just being constant voices coming from every facet of my life.
Totally. Yeah. Sorting through the Discord. It's tough.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorting through the noise.
Jon, do you have you had a great observation about how we don't know what most of the intention for places we go are. Most of the places we go, they really are advertisements masquerading as something else.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what most of the internet functions as. If you were going to name the proper telos, name the proper purpose for the internet, or take a stab at it, or if the internet was functioning at its best possible, capacity, do you have a vision or a word or an idea of what that internet could be, what that place could be, for us to start moving towards it, or even just to dream about?
Yeah, I think widespread information is of value, and that's not there's this idea of the hyperinflation of information, right? That the more information is out there, the less knowledge is out there. But there's also a very real sense in which the internet has provided things like medical information to people in need. It has been an indispensable research tool. And I think in areas like that, areas where it's moving away from the profitable, from the influencer idea, and moving into the actual provision of necessities to people who may not be able to get them otherwise. I think that is absolutely, I really, really love the idea of the internet cafe, somewhere you can go to do your research, somewhere you can go to learn these things that's not invading your home and your personal life.
So maintaining some of that separation.
Yeah.
How might someone, do you think, let's say young man's listening to this conversation, and where would be a good place for them to start doing that? Because I don't think a lot of guys, especially if you were in my world where tech is your work, it's pretty impossible to escape without cutting off your livelihood, right?
Right.
So how do you find that balance? Where do you figure out how to start creating that separation?
Yeah, I think a really important starting point, and it's what I missed for years of just consuming the internet and trying to get away from it, is I thought for the longest time that I could just out willpower the advertisers and the companies and whatever was trying to keep me distracted. I thought that, oh, I'll set a screen time limit on my phone. And the problem is then there's that button, right? Give me 15 more minutes, give me one more minute, suspend indefinitely. And eventually I would always succumb to clicking that button. Sometimes I'd make it, a day, sometimes I'd make it an hour, but I would always fall for that. So I think the most important first step is just to be on guard about what you're consuming, to approach the internet intentionally, not to just get on when, you're bored, or, oh, I kind of want to learn about this thing. That may have its place, but just approaching the internet with a sense of almost a sense of adversity, like almost as, this is going to give me something good, and there's a lot of pitfalls along the way, and I'm going to try and identify those pitfalls before they're here.
What are common pitfalls?
I think I think that really does kind of vary person to person. For me, it was the endless rabbit hole of information. I get on to learn this one thing about an author for a paper I was writing, and then, oh well, there's this short YouTube essay about this author. Oh, and then look, there's this recommended video about this book he wrote, and then 2 hours later, and I'm nowhere near where I was aiming for.
Right. You're learning about drafts in the forest or
Right.
something.
Yeah. And there are a lot of really helpful tools out there for that. There's a Chrome extension which disables YouTube recommended, so you can only watch whatever video you specifically looked up, and there's no extra recommendations. And I think just starting to install little things like that, small changes, really helps you to notice where those areas are for you specifically.
Yeah, we were talking about before we hit record the Brave browser. I've noticed it has cut so many ads and so much distraction. It's
Yeah.
probably the best browser. Folks, if you have not used the Brave browser, it's probably the best ad blocker. It's an ad blocker built into your browser, and it's incredible. We are not sponsored by them, not supported by them, but I wholeheartedly recommend the Brave browser. It's got a little lion logo. You can go check it out. So, as you've reintroduced certain pieces of technology into your life, you have like on your laptop, or maybe you have a TV now. I don't know. What specific tools, you mentioned the Chrome extension already. Are there other specific tools that you have used, or specific limits you have set in yourself? Anything like that?
Yeah. I kind of get a cheat because my wife is like super helpful in all of this. Okay. And she's a super helpful just reminder, snap back to reality, hey, you've been on your computer for a while. Are you doing what you set out there to do? And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm playing chess again. Right.
As fun as chess is.
Man, I have a terrible problem with chess.com, and my wife was trying to get me out of it, but now she's just in it too. And we're just playing chess all the time. It's just madness. But it's stuff like that, right? It's that I'm not super intentional about that, and it grows over time. So it goes from, I'm just going to keep rolling with the chess example. I think chess.com is probably one of the better uses of the internet, but that's where we're at. So I'm just going to keep going with it. I started trying to play, 1 or 2 games a day, and then now I'm playing 3 or 4 games a day. And 3 or 4 games of chess isn't that much time. Doesn't sound that bad, but I didn't make that conscious decision. So it's something that I need to go back and reevaluate. When did this start becoming a thing that I wanted to do more? Why am I doing it more? Is it adding to my life? But as far as tools go, I think accountability partners are great. I think using ad blockers and Chrome extensions that help limit your time. Even having a friend or someone set up like screen time controls if you're using an Apple product or whatever the equivalent is on other products. Just having some hard stop point where you can't go past it is really important for me, for sure.
So you mentioned the setting out or doing what you set out to do. Like even if it's a fine thing, chess.com, for example, no problem playing chess, but it's not what you set out to do. Then there's that reevaluation. Sounds like a lot of what we've been talking about, Banjo, with the monotasking. We've had this thread going through our last couple of challenges about just having a focused life and focusing on one thing at a time rather than being distracted. Like maybe it's not even technology. Maybe you're just distracted by the 20 things you need to do around your house. Pick one and just do the one. Don't try to get all 20 done at the same time. It sounds like that's a similar thing to what we're encouraging, which is exciting to me because it just lends to my theory that multitasking is not real.
Oh, yeah. I totally agree.
Very good. So as you've kind of been bringing these devices back in, are there things like, would you ever reintroduce a smartphone, or are there things that you would just say never again?
Yeah. At this point, I don't see myself ever getting a smartphone again. I think the one thing that could bring me back would be if it was work related, if there was some need to have. But I also, at this point for me personally, I think it's kind of just a requirement for a job for me that I wouldn't have to have a smartphone. So unless there was some sort of crisis that demanded it, I wouldn't. Because there is this, I mean, there's this really cool, kind of Neo-esque side to things where I don't know where I'm going half the time, and I get lost all the time now. And I have learned to love that. I mean, I've learned more about the area that I live than I did for 4 years. I've just learned the roads, and that's something that I think I would just miss too much to be willing to give it up. That kind of lifestyle of being disconnected and just being out in the real world.
I bet that it brings to memory, actually. There was an Art of Manliness. I don't know if you're familiar with the Art of Manliness podcast. It was a while back now. I think it would have been while I was still in college, because I remember the run I was on when I listened to this episode. It was one of our college runs, like a summer workout, Banjo.
Right.
So it was a while back. I'll see if I can find the episode. If not, just know it was about the link between using or not using a GPS, basically using physical maps or no map at all to find your way around, and memory, and how that is incredibly good for you in the long term. And just the way your brain has to work so much harder where you're in the world.
Yeah.
A problem, or the problem that is for people. And, if you don't know where you are, that's a massive problem for any individual. And we erased a whole set of problem solving by having a GPS in our pocket. So have you found there are other things like that where you have to figure out these other problems? It just takes too much brain power, or maybe the inconvenience of it turned into a good thing for you?
Yeah. I mean, there's been all sorts of little things and some bigger things. I got stranded once, and I couldn't call for an Uber. And there was no way for me to find that out. So I just had to just kind of walk around until I figured out where I was, and then go buy a charger so I could call someone, because my phone was dead, because it's just always dead at this point. And that was it. There's been bigger experiences like that. And then there's been a lot of little things in terms of maps, figuring out where to go for stuff, not having a automatic enlightening directory in my pocket, right? Not being able to Google, hey, I need a light bulb, where should I go? But just having to figure that stuff out. Light bulb's kind of a silly example because most places sell light bulbs, but just all sorts of engagement tasks for my brain that have heightened my problem solving.
That's really
really
great
cool
that you got that. I mean, I as you're talking about that story of like getting stranded, I'm thinking about like how is that solved 30 years ago? It's the payphone, which is totally gone. Like some of my favorite movies are set in the 90s, and I always love when the payphone shows up. Like that's when civilization died. Is when we got rid of the last payphone in New York. That was it. That was the end of things.
There's still a payphone. I own a tiny town in Colorado that we go through, and we try to use it.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah.
That's great.
There's still at least one out there, people.
The last hope for humanity right there.
Yep.
That's where you got to go. Speaking of the end of civilization as we know it, I do have one kind of like arts and literature related question.
Yeah.
But hopefully this will be applicable for other people as well. I'm really curious. You're a full time poet. As a creative person, it seems incredibly difficult to kind of live a creative life in 2024 sans internet, sans iPhone. There's all kinds of places that I've wanted to send short stories to or send essays to, and they're always looking for people who have an Instagram following or have a Twitter handle or stuff like that. They want people who have people behind them, and if you don't have that, that kind of separates. There's they you get kind of cut out of that dealing. At least that's been my experience. But I'm curious, how do you go about doing your very creative task? How do you market yourself without the digital landscape?
Yeah. So I recently started an Instagram account for my poetry, that is managed by my wife and is used exclusively for that. 'Cause again, like I was saying, the internet is, in my opinion, one big advertisement. And if I'm trying to advertise something, I think that's still a very valid use of it. But that being said, the vast majority of the connections I've made doing this, every event that's booked me out to go write poetry for them and stuff like that has all been in person connections. And because of that, I have local ties to real people who I get to meet face to face, which is great for me because I was never good at internet management anyway. It was always, I just never could figure out how to come across as a normal person on the internet. So yeah, it's like I said, I can't preach complete abstination for artists from the internet because I have found that it's something that is needed in my work. But I think there's also a side of it in which I am very inspired creatively when I'm not on the internet because I am not constantly surrounded by ideas. And because of that, I have to generate a lot more thought behind what I'm doing than I used to. And I don't know if that holds true for everyone, but for me, it was certainly an added benefit.
Yeah, I even just thinking about, what kind of ideas are on the internet. It's always best of or worst of. Like
Mhm.
there's never a YouTube video about this was middle of the road and that was good.
Yeah.
That because that doesn't get clicks.
Right.
Which means that there's only really two kinds of ideas that ever show up on the internet, which is that was the best thing that's ever existed, or that's the worst thing that's ever existed. So that's wise to say. Well, spending time away from that allows for different kinds of opinions, and I think that makes a lot of sense. What you're saying about, hey, if the internet is designed for advertising, well, let's use it for advertising. Like that seems like a really smart strategy, and it seems like a good idea. Having one person manage that for you, that's a really great benefit to have.
Yeah.
I like that, the management piece, especially if it's if you can manage, and you may not, maybe you don't have someone who can do it for you for free, or maybe you don't have anyone you can even pay. But I wonder if there's a way that individuals can set up like separate management spaces. Even like I'm thinking about this even in relation to our own show, because everything is just on my personal computer that everything's run on. We're bootstrapped. But if there's kind of a way to create some kind of mental separation, some of the work, the advertising that we have to do, and the social media interactions that we have to do, but then separate that from my personal even more. So I don't have an answer to that right now, but I like the idea. I think that's there. Well, I'm going to feed off this conversation for a while for sure. So this is not technical or technologically related, but you mentioned events booking you for poetry, and I'm going to go on a tangent and learn about that. Like, I've never heard of anyone booking a poet for an event.
Yeah.
Like, what is that?
So what I do is I have a little folding chair table set up that I plop up wherever there's a lot of foot traffic, put a tablecloth over it, and I have a little handwritten sign, poems for sale, your topic, your price. And I have a 54 Underwood Leader typewriter. And I just start typing away, and people hear the sound, they get interested, they see it, they want a poem. And so I was doing that for a while on weekends while I was teaching. And then when I got done teaching, I was starting to think about what I want to do for work. I just realized I haven't felt that fulfilled doing work ever. And the money was there and the interest was there. So I started doing that. And a lady came by who worked for a local artist. And she said, "Hey, could you do a pop up at this art show we're doing?" I said, "For sure. That sounds awesome. I love it when I get to work inside and not in the heat." Um, and that just started this whole slew of connections to booking out events. We're trying to land a wedding. Haven't done that yet, but we have some interest on that front. So I just go set up, and all the guests tell me what they want a poem about. I write them a poem.
That is so cool. Like, how long are these?
They're anywhere from, I try never to do less than 4 lines, but anywhere from 4 lines to a full page, just depending how good the topic is, I guess.
Wow. So you'll put some time into this.
Yeah.
So, and then you're making money on this. Just donations. You said your topic, your price. That is so cool. And this has been sustainable.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I love that. Banjo, be encouraged.
That's so cool.
There are poets in this world.
Yeah. I'm a little jealous though, because nobody's like, you could say, your poem, your price. Nobody ever would stick around for me to write a short story because it would take 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And that wouldn't sell as well. But that's an amazing opportunity. Like that's great that you get to do that. I'm really curious actually about people's reactions to that. I mean, it's so different from like a caricature, that you get most people, or even selling like art on the sidewalk. How do people react to a poem about their topic? Like, what is that like? What is the experience like for them?
I mean, total range. I've had so much, there's people who laugh, people who just go, "Oh, that's cute." I've had a few people break down crying, which I thought would feel really good about my poetry. Like, look at this emotion I've invoked. But it was actually just super awkward sitting there while a stranger cried in front of me on a busy street. And I was like, well, that happened.
So tears of like sadness or joy, or what kind of tears?
Yeah. One that I'm specifically thinking of is these 2 roommates. They'd lived together for 8 years. They had a dog together. One was moving away. And so they asked for a poem called Long Distant Roommates. And I wrote it for them. And then they were both just sobbing, reading it and, going back and forth. "I'm going to miss you so much." And I was just there in the middle of it, watching it go down.
That's really, now have you I guess you probably give away the copy, but would you ever like collect these into like a big book? That'd be a great coffee table book.
Yeah. So I have all the ones, cause sometimes people ask for one and then walk away. So I keep all of those. I keep all the ones I just write while I'm out there. And the goal is to produce an anthology.
That's awesome. Oh, I want that.
So they're out there somewhere.
They're out there somewhere.
So when Jon McCallum is a famous poet and long dead and gone, people will be like trying to buy these.
Yeah.
That's
those would be
cool.
rare. Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. That's awesome.
So what's so cool to me about that, kind of back to the technology, is you are producing single copies of this on a typewriter. And the typewriter, right, that is cool. People get fascinated by that. But some people use a typewriter, like authors use typewriters all the time, and it gets sent off and a bunch of copies are made, right? But you're literally making one copy of this poem, and then it's out of your life forever.
Yep.
I don't know. That just sounds like all the content we produce, there's copies of it everywhere. I don't even know how to put into words my reaction to that. Like, I create this thing and it's gone.
Has that given you a little bit of freedom in writing though, that it's just gone from you? Like I look at my Google Drive and it's a graveyard of bad ideas or like half bad ideas. Is that kind of freeing to be like, all right, well, I found it freeing to put my writing this week on the typewriter and to have that artifact and be like, yeah, I accomplished something this week. But has it been freeing to just kind of like send it out and to be done with it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the long-term goal for me career-wise is to move into novels. And I've been working on one for a while, and my productivity with it just really vamped up because I just started approaching it with that attitude of, I'm going to finish this page and then I'm going to put it away. And it stops me from thinking about how that's going to reflect on me or how perfect it needs to be. Because the other thing with sitting out there is, at most I have their attention for 6 minutes, most of the time closer to 3 before they start to
Yeah.
get bored and want to walk away. So it's made me just have to really quickly hear what they have to say, put that onto paper, give it out, never see it again. So it's a weird experience of just trying to empathize with, 40, 50 people a day as they tell me these things about their life, give them something about it, then move on to the next one.
That's amazing, because you got to distill that skill of seeing somebody and putting it into words. I mean, that's like Hemingway stuff. That's just like see somebody, get to know them in 30 seconds, and then put it into words. That's a whole writer's boot camp right there. See, this is killing me because I feel like I found a kindred spirit here in Jon, and he's, I don't know how many miles away in Tennessee, and he's got no phone for me to get in touch with him. This is a double-edged sword.
So do you think that that you could have done this, learned to sit and focus on something so intently for so short of a time to be able to produce poetry? Do you think that you could have done that with the distraction of the smartphone?
No way. I would not. I mean, I didn't even start that until I'd been without a smartphone for 8 or 9 months. And when I had a smartphone, I think even if it would have affected it in two ways. It would have, for one, made it really hard to focus on that for that intense short period and then move. But also I would have been super tempted to look up words, use a rhyming dictionary, Google Forms, right? Try and figure out how to make this into a better product instead of just being able to write it and hand it out.
Wow. So you've cracked the code for both writer's block and having just good enough product.
I mean, I hope so. Most of the time they pay me before they read it, so I don't really know if it's good enough product, but the people are still buying. So, yeah.
And there's a lot of people coming through our part of Tennessee too.
That's right.
That's incredible. Man, you're making me more and more just want to get up and chuck my smartphone and call it a day.
This might be the last episode of Forging Honor. I mean, at this point, we're just going to throw away our laptops, and we'll just be two men sitting on a bench somewhere. People will have to come and listen to it, philosopher peripatetic style.
Do you have, if you don't have a smartphone, are they just paying you cash, or do you have a Venmo?
Yeah, I run Cash App and Venmo through my computer.
Okay, so you can't do it through your computer.
Yeah.
Very cool.
But I never know how much they pay me for them either. So that's also a fun element of it.
Fun, kind of freeing actually. Yeah, so do you find that because of things like that, where you're not able to check, do you find that you're thinking about it constantly throughout the day when you know that there's a notification that's going to come in or an email that's going to come to your laptop, or you don't know how much money you made that day? Are you thinking about it constantly? Or have you learned how to still focus on the present without that resolution that you can instantly get from a smartphone?
Yeah. Towards the beginning of my moving away from the digital world, I would have thought about it all the time. But at this point, I'm so far removed from it that the idea of being able to see it instantly is more of that would be kind of cool, and less of that's the norm. It's no longer normal for me to get updates like that regularly. So it doesn't really cross my mind that much.
That's really good to hear, because I could imagine where you're stuck in that place where you need the instant resolve. And then here I am not getting that. And that's all I think about all day. Because I order a package and all I do is think about, where is that package in the United States?
Yeah.
When is it going to get to my front door? I can imagine how much worse it would be to not have that tracking capability on my smartphone. But you're right. At some point, you just have to accept that you're going to have to move on with life and know it'll get here when it gets here.
Yeah.
So kind of changing topics here a little bit. When you first switched, because I've done the dumb phone thing for a little bit before. It's usually I'll swap my SIM to a dumb phone on Sundays, just for less distraction on Sunday. Mm-hmm. And I've noticed there's kind of a spiritual battle going on in me. And it's easy for me to I look down. Oh, look at all those smartphone or Apple Watch users. Look at these people who aren't, they're so distracted or something. Do you find that, this is probing into some more spiritual, anything you're willing to share with us. We appreciate it.
That is a really tricky line because on one hand, I do think that 90% roughly, probably, I don't really know, but a lot of phone usage is at best meaningless and at worst detrimental. Um, but also, I don't think anyone is for the worse because they do that, because it's such an ingrained part of our culture at this point. Um, and usually quite the opposite reaction happens in most social circles of people think it's super weird that I'm doing what I'm doing, right? There's usually a lot of why on earth would you do that? That's silly. Like, why would you buy that phone kind of thing? Which definitely keeps me humble in that area. And towards the beginning there was more judgment from me, but now most of the time it's more of a it would be cool to be able to help those people with that because I do think it is a problem, but separating the problem from the person I think is really important there.
That makes a lot of sense. Separating the problem from the person. I think that's really important. You're exactly right. Like if I ever whip out my flip phone on a Sunday, people give me this strange look. It's
Yeah.
like I've had a few people go, oh, that's super cool, but very rarely though. Like, do you encounter those people? Are they usually other light phone users or something like that?
Yeah, I know 3 people who use a light phone right now, and every time we just have that little nod, that little moment of, oh yeah, we're doing this. But the most common reaction I get when people bring it up is either that's weird, why would you do that? Or people going, oh man, I respect that. I wish I could do it. And then well, why can't you do it? And then that's usually followed by a weird moment of silence. And then we move on from that moment.
So I guess there's all these excuses. What were your excuses before you made the switch?
I need to be able to get in contact with people. Was the big one, but I didn't really lose that. Um, well, what about my friends who moved away? I'm not going to see what they're doing anymore. I'm not going to be able to be updated about their lives anymore. Um, that was a big one for me. Let me think. Oh yeah. The biggest one was I didn't want to carry a bunch of stuff with me. I didn't want to have to bring a book every time I knew I was going to be waiting in line somewhere. I didn't want to have to carry a notepad. I didn't want to have to do all of that. And technology is so efficient at that kind of thing, and such an ingrained part of our culture that there's really just at first this feeling of why on earth would I do that when no one else is doing that? Like I have so many people I respect, spiritual leaders, mentors in my life. They have smartphones, they have these things. Why should I try and be different? Like what is the actual purpose there?
Yeah, there's a loss for words with my excuses actually. I still have excuses for why I haven't completely ditched the smartphone. But yeah, you're exactly right. Like at the end of the day, there's a lot of why haven't I? Why haven't most people? Do you think the world needs the smartphone?
That is a great question, and something I think about a lot is kind of like how do you apply the grand imperative here? Right. You know, if it's right for me to do it, does that mean it's right for everyone to do it? I think that if everyone switched to a light phone tomorrow, there would be mass chaos and it would be very problematic. But I think that specifically in the West, because I don't know how beneficial or impactful the light phone has been in other cultures, but specifically in the West, specifically in the context of 21st century America, I think that everyone could and should make an effort to move as far away as possible from the smartphone. And that may look different for different people, but also the more people who do that, the more the culture opens up, right? Because if you had a large contingent of people not using smartphones, all of a sudden the job thing becomes more of a non-issue because people companies will work their way around that, right? And so the more people who do it, the easier it gets for everyone, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah,
So
you see this with other movements where, enough people stop buying a product and the product has to change, right?
Right.
Banjo?
I was just going to say that, the proletariat, rise up. You have nothing to lose but your apps, but your distraction.
Oh, keep that Marxist talk off of here. I kid. But yeah, you're exactly right. Like at the end of the day, ditching the smartphone in so many ways, like it's never not like it's not going to harm you.
Which is funny, JJ, because you were talking about excuses. The thing that if I'm being honest about why I don't switch off of an iPhone is I'm afraid to. Like, I think at a very real level, what you've done takes a lot of courage, takes a lot of guts in the 21st century to be like, yeah, I'm not going to go with the crowd. I'm not going to, a lot of us talk a big game about, well, we're going to, cut down our screen time, or we're going to walk away from this, or we're going to delete apps. But you actually did it. You have jumped, and it seems like you're the better for it. Which makes me think that the rest of us, we're just, I think, thinking for myself, I won't speak for others, but I'm afraid to. It seems like a scary thing to do. But frankly, it's very inspiring to see what you've done and what you're continuing to do. That it's not cutting off an umbilical cord. Well, maybe it's cutting off an umbilical cord so that you can actually grow.
That's a funny analogy right there.
That is. And there's an element of it that, it was hard to do for sure. But a lot of people who want to live the lifestyle of a digital recluse, right, to get away, think that somehow I had a lot of self-control in doing this. And anyone who knows me knows that that's not true. I don't have great self-control. I can't set consistent alarms. Like I'm horrible at doing things regularly and having that control. And that's what ultimately actually drove me to the point I'm at, right? Is I cannot be responsible for a smartphone, and I don't have the ability to manage that well. And so I had to find the alternative, right? Like I can't be in this environment. I have to get away from it, which is what's kind of led me to this point.
So one of the things I've thought about with the future of tech, we have things like these wearables, like the Whoop. Have you seen those?
Yeah.
They measure, it's like an Apple Watch, no screen though. So it's measuring all your health stuff. If you go on a run or exercise, it's measuring all of that. But then it's managed through an app or a website. So no screen. Or we've got like the smart home systems that don't necessarily have screens. Now, I mentioned a Banjo before. Like there are the light bulbs that will automatically brighten with the sunrise and get darker with the sunset, just to bring your body into that rhythm. Do you think, and what do you think the place of that kind of tech is? Perhaps screen-free and less distracting. Are those things that you would consider implementing into your life? And how might you do that?
Yeah, that is for me a important question, because those are becoming more and more common. And I don't have a solid, here's how I'm going to move forward with that opinion. But as of where I'm at right now, having a more inefficient life has been beneficial to me. Knowing less, or having less information available, having less ease of access to things, has just improved my sense of self-confidence, my sense of self-worth, my kind of thought clarity. The way I interact with the world has changed because of that. And so where I'm at right now is I wouldn't want to implement things that would make my life more efficient unless it was an area of deficiency that I felt like was becoming problematic to my inner psyche. Now, that being said, I think the light bulbs, that's sick. I've always wondered how to do that. I think that's super cool, and I definitely want to look into those.
Yeah, so there are tools you might want to use, but it sounds like you're wanting them to fit very specific problems in your life.
Yeah.
And solve very specific issues rather than, oh, that's a cool piece of tech, let's get that.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
That's a good approach.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to say, I know we're running short on time here, but I think it's just an amazing point that you're making, or that having more information did not make you happier. I mean, maybe that should be obvious, but like, I'm just thinking about, a lot of I'm a high school, middle school teacher as well, and a lot of the kids that I watch are no happier for the knowledge that they gain on the internet. Even if it's information that they've gained about mental health. 9 times out of 10, I think the kid who has learned something about mental health on the internet is way less happy, so much more unhappy. But we keep tricking ourselves and saying, well, if I watch if I watch one more tips and tricks about how to defeat mental health, if I watch one more thing, if I read one more article, then I'll figure it out. And you're saying, for your experience, it wasn't the case. Getting rid of all of that stuff was a totally different fix, I guess.
Yeah.
Lots to think about.
Any final questions for you, Banjo?
Man, too many. But I guess I'll just pick one. If you would give a word of encouragement to somebody who is maybe staring down the barrel of maybe their own internet addiction, or maybe is just kind of looking at their life and their time and saying, I've been spending too much time on this thing. I've put too much here, but I don't know how to get out of it. I don't feel like I have the ability to do that. I don't even know if it's worth trying. What would you say to that person to encourage them moving forward? Bonus points if you do it as a free verse poem.
What makes a free verse poem? Yeah, I feel like that's whatever I say. Yeah. I think that the first thing I would say is that coming to that point, you have made it farther than a lot of people. Like you are closer to escaping that, because what's so insidious about it is so many people don't even realize that this is a problem. And once you reach that point, there are 2 ways to move forward. One, which is the more logical way, is to seek help, right? There are friends, there are resources. Find someone who's been through this journey, because at this point, there's probably someone in your life who has. Reach out to them. But number 2, and this is the path that I would recommend to anyone, is if you're struggling with smartphone addiction, just sell it, smash it. Like if you're at that point where this is a waste of time in your life, just get rid of it and like just overcome the fear, stare down the barrel of the gun and see that it's not loaded, that nothing bad is going to happen when you don't have a smartphone. And then reinvest yourself slowly into that world, taking what you need.
Excellent. Thank you.
I love that. Banjo essentially took my last question. But if there is someone who, for whatever reason, they're ready to give up the smartphone, or maybe they don't have as much of an addiction, they don't have the problems with YouTube or the more insidious addictions, but they would like to see, it'd be good for them to have fewer distractions, spend less time. They want to remove it a little more from their life. Is there one practical thing that you would advise them on, or are you pretty much whole hog, get rid of the phone?
I think there's kind of a dual first step, which will just make your phone a less fun place to be, which is to get rid of whatever app you spend the most screen time on that you feel least attached to, right? So, maybe you are on Instagram 2 hours a day, but you can't imagine life without that. But you spend an hour and a half on Twitter a day, and you could go without Twitter for a week. Get rid of Twitter, grayscale your phone. All of a sudden, your phone becomes this place that's less fun to be, and it allows you to actually account for more and more of that time you're spending on it.
Gotcha. So a place to start, and maybe you'll discover you don't actually need your smartphone.
Yeah.
I love it. This has been a great conversation. So just a reminder, we're in the middle of our 6-week challenge. So that's 42 days. It's a simple daily task for us as Christian men, and that's turn your phone completely off for 1 hour every day.
This has been the Forging Honor podcast. Music and production is by Elliot George. For more information about what we do or to learn how to get involved, visit our website at forginghonor.com. There you'll find information about our community, the Forge, and how to join other young men seeking to glorify God in thought, word, and deed. You'll also find blog articles, book recommendations, and more ways to grow as a Christian man.
If you enjoyed the show, please tell a friend or family member about Forging Honor. We would also appreciate it if you would take a moment to like and subscribe. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, a rating and review only takes a moment, and it goes a long way towards growing the Forging Honor community.
Thanks for taking the time with us today. We hope you'll take up the work alongside us and join us in the task of Forging Honor. We'll see you next time.